Hello, and welcome to The New Normal, a series of virtual discussions intended to help us get out of our comfort zones and debate different perspectives of the future. My name is Todd Terrazas, and I'm your host. On this episode, we have Christopher Lafayette giving a talk on removing barriers to innovation. Christopher is an emergent technologist in medtech, virtual and augmented reality, AI, climate, and applied sciences. He is a Silicon Valley national and international speaker, thought leader, and culture and inclusion advocate. Christopher is the founder of the Black Technology Mentorship Program, a mentor-mentee program that inspires, educates, and brings underserved Black communities into technology. Following his talk, we'll go into a breakout rooms for about 25 minutes. Afterwards, we'll return to this main room for an open discussion. If you're watching this episode on Facebook, you can join us in the Zoom by going to thenewnormalseries.com. Now, without further ado, here is Christopher Lafayette.
Hi, Todd. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the time. I certainly appreciate the invitation and what you're doing, and I hopefully that we come to see that your organization can flourish in these particular times that we find ourselves in, and these are very powerful and very interesting times. I'm happy to be here on many levels to talk about more of the sensitivity things when it comes to technology and the things that we sometimes don't want to talk about, but what we find ourselves coming closer to realizing that these are discussions that we should have had some time ago, but now the time is better than any. And when we look about around us, contemporary our time in this new COVID era, and we look at the technologies that we're using, and we come to find out just how far we've come, just how far we've arrived. When we look at this and we find ourselves in this situation, we realize just how advanced we've become in the last 10 years. And the greatest significant advancement in technology of the last 10 years is undoubtedly communication. And when we look at the disruption of technology, we often look at, and when we call it disrupt, it's usually another technology that supersedes and changes another technology. But rarely have we ever seen an outlier come in and shift the narrative on how we look at technology, how we build it, and how we use it, as what we're seeing today when it comes to a pandemic. 6 months ago, how relevant was Uber? 6 months ago, how relevant was Airbnb? And all of that has shifted. 6 months ago, how relevant was Zoom? From a 10 million user base to a 400 million active daily user base. That's transformational. We've never heard of anything like that before. And in the disrupt, a lot of things fail. But from that failure, a lot of things grow and they go on to a slope of enlightenment, if you will, especially in the technological build and the development. When it comes to the merge pairing and the fundamental construct of the smart city itself. But it dawned on me some time ago, over the last several months, that as far as we've come, and as advanced as we've become in the last 30 years, 20, and even 10 years, on the dawn and the footsteps of emerging technology, it dawned on me that we have to go back. Because we're on the precipice of entering into new virtual and artificially intelligent environments where these narratives are coming directly from human intelligentsia. And if we're going to extend reality, then we must bring reality with it. And if we only build technology under a certain monoculture and not a polyculture, that as great as we find our technology to be today, we will never be as great as we can be until we move towards a more unhomogenized, polycultural, ecoculture, ecobiotic diversity setting. And so we have to go back to bring the Black community in particular. When I was young, I would come home and there was a man that sat at the desk and he had a little light on and he was taking apart and building up and tearing down and taking apart and building up computers. And I'd go to this man and I'd say, Dad, what's the internet? He'd tell me what the internet was. And I say, Dad, what's the web? And he would tell me how the web functioned and flowed. Now, it wasn't until years down the road when I came to Silicon Valley, and when I came to Silicon Valley, I came to Silicon Valley with black-colored skin. And when I came to Silicon Valley, I looked around the street, around companies, around whole cities. And barely did I ever see anyone that looked like me. But as I advanced in my understanding of technology and emergent technology and applied sciences, a lot of that came from, not all, but a lot of that came from people that didn't look like me. And it dawned on me that when I was young, I was getting the fundamental constructs of my educational training and technology from someone in my household in a city of Oakland, California, where people that I grew up around in neighborhoods, they didn't have a parent in technology. And to be candid, a lot of the neighborhoods that I grew up in, they didn't even have a dad. And so as I found myself speaking around the country and speaking around Silicon Valley and being invited to speak around the world and talking about technology in front of audiences of hundreds or even thousands, it began to dawn on me that we're moving into an era where we take machine learning and data intelligence and data sets and augmented and virtual reality, and we're taking these and we're extending it and we're operating and conducting business and doing business in it, where autonomous systems are becoming ever more clear and more needed. It dawned on me and occurred to me that we've only served one slice of the pie in technology and that we haven't done enough, and so that we have to go back. And I said to myself, if I can learn from all of these different people that don't look like me and that don't come from where I come from, what if I can get all these technologists and take these hidden heroes, women and men alike, and then go back to where I'm from and places where I'm from, and take these hidden geniuses, young adults, K through 12, or youth, and bridge and bring them together, no matter the ideological differences of our mentors or even our mentees, conservative, liberal, call it what you will, but with a servant's heart and servant leadership to want to help and educate, instruct, and build. What if I can build them together? And so I launched an initiative called the Black Technology Mentorship Program, where it's a mentor-mentee program and platform first. It's educational and education reimagined second. And it's last mile fulfillment in the third. And the last mile contains of two tracks: an entrepreneurial track, classes, training, hackathons, platform development, lab to funding, lab to market initiatives, and the career path, and get them in the door through postmodern apprenticeship, and don't leave them alone, but have a place for them to be able to build on their emotional intelligence, soft skill development, and even hard skill development, to pair our mentors and mentees together and to do a thing that's never been done before in this capacity, especially particular to our time in these virtual constructs that we find ourselves in. That has been the narrative thus far. And when I put it out there publicly and I launched it, I knew that it would take a lot of vulnerability because I didn't know how my peers would look at me. I didn't know what the reception would look like. I didn't know how they would feel. I didn't know if anyone would really care. But we just announced this morning that we have over 1,000 mentee students now in less than 3 months. And we have almost 200 mentors of technologists and some non-technical that have answered the call. And I realized that this wasn't just mentors and experts helping those that need help and pointing them in the right direction, because every single one of us here, at some point, if we're honest, somebody has helped point us in the right direction. And so at what point do we give back? And it's bi-directional. It's not just mentors helping mentees. But with 1 hour committed of your time in a year, you'll come to appreciate that a mentee will help you as well. And have Thanksgiving in your heart. I saw what happened with George Floyd. I saw what's been happening around the country, a lot of social media posts, a lot of talking, but at some point, getting past and beyond the politics and the bureaucracy, yes, we have to talk about it. Yes, we should discuss it. But at some point, when will action ensue? I love technology. I've been building it almost my whole entire life. Some say I know it very well. But the technology that I know will never be as great until everyone, no matter the color, no matter the gender, has an opportunity to build it. Then, for greater accessibility, identifiability, and the whole ecosystem, when you bring in more, it doesn't take away jobs, it adds jobs. When you bring in people from different diverse backgrounds and cultures, the whole ecosystem levels up. I categorically believe this. There may be those that differ, but I believe it's so anyhow. I appreciate the time that I've been given with you. I'm looking forward for us going into our breakout discussions to have some candid conversations. Let's get some things off our chest if that's what we need to do. But at the end of the day, let's find common ground that we can build together, because I certainly don't know it. I can't do it alone and by myself. And it takes our hidden heroes that are with me today to help come with refined and better explorations so that we can go about the business of servant leadership and doing for others that which was done for us. And so the question that's posed, I'll let Todd give that question that's been asked and that I submitted to him. And I hope that you would consider it, because I want to know what's on your hearts and minds when we talk about diversity. And when you hear the word diversity, what does come to your mind? Because a lot of people talk about diversity. If you go to different diversity heads and leads in Silicon Valley and you ask them what the definition of diversity is, you get 5 different definitions. I tend to look at eco-culture going further back and saying, hey, let's go on a very rudimentary level and on a cultural level. And let's just consider that ecosystems are not software and hardware. Ecosystems are people. And the more culture in an ecosystem, the stronger that ecosystem is. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Let's break out into the sessions.
All right, to the breakout. Hey, Jessica.
How you doing?
How are you?
Can you contact, like, let me see, I just accidentally removed myself from the breakout room.
Oh, no.
Well, we got the instruction to remove ourselves from the breakout room.
Oh, I can.
Yeah, we got the little signal that says go back to the mothership, so to speak.
Yeah, so I'm back. I accidentally cut myself off.
But it was in the middle of a fascinating sentence, so there you go.
That's right. It was fascinating. It was so intellectually curious.
There you I think your last word was mantle.
I was.
That's hysterical. I've never heard that before. That's so perfect.
I had not heard it either, but it is a perfect
Yeah,
description.
that is perfect.
Hashtag mantle.
Hey, Chris, how was your room?
It's fantastic. We talked a lot about the corporate level, and what we covered in the expressions is that what is the approach to the solution when we talk about on a corporate level and looking at leadership and how leadership is pawning a lot of the responsibility for greater inclusivity of gender and color and communities of color, if you will. They're pawning that onto HR, which ultimately trickles down to our ERG groups that are women-led or Black ERG, if you will. And when they come up with a solution, the solution has to go back up the hill and it has to get to executive leadership. But leadership rarely will approve good founded solutions and even pilots that come down the pipeline. And so you're dealing with leadership that we know and acknowledge that they have a fiduciary responsibility. But the problem is that leadership lacks vulnerability. And they lack open-mindedness for anyone to tell them and to put something that's more pragmatic in front of them. And so what happens is that they reject the different, from the very committees that they create and that they formulate, they reject good founded solution opportunities. That's number one. Number two, we touched on when we look at D&I, globalists and diversity and inclusion heads and departments in the companies, one of the biggest problems is that when you look at D&I leadership, is that D&I leadership is creating more opportunities for D&I leadership. And they're growing a culture of D&I leadership, where they should be growing a culture of how do we diminish these type of positions in the first place. You see, a company, a corporation will be better once it loses that, because there will never be a need for D&I once we become more inclusive by nature and by the way that we process from end to end, from entry into sustainability and progressive growth when you get into the company itself. And so that's been a problem that's been plaguing, because here in Silicon Valley, they tend to throw money at these companies, became incredibly wealthy over the last 10 and 20 years. Money, we've never, bigger than American steel, bigger than oil, these companies and platforms are, and they realized early on that they had an equity problem. And so what they did is they threw some money at it as a feel-good initiative. Well, that didn't necessarily translate into a revenue driver and to drive profits in that regard. And they should have started looking at having more culture. And the culture, for the reason, is not for a feel-good initiative, Laura, but it's more for a reason of driving culture drives revenue. And when the more culture that you have, and the more women that you have, and the more identifiable products that you have, the more that your whole ecosystem will be leveled up. And so when we look at the eco-culture of things, instead of us looking at these feel-good initiatives and let's feel good about it and sit around the campfire kumbaya, why don't we hire the people that we want to buy our products? That's kind of what we touched on to some degree, and there was a lot more said, Todd.
So you're saying, right, these departments have to work themselves out of a job, right?
They should, and that should be the point. But once you get in there, you give somebody a $180,000 salary a year to become a solutionist, they tend to like that. And they tend to realize that if I do come up with a solution, then that eliminates me and my $180,000 a year salary. Let's be frank. It does do that. And so now it turns into an everlasting position where it becomes a new normal. And that's not an appetite that I have for here in the Valley, to have a D&I person. I don't want Silicon Valley extending me a hand out. I'm really extending a hand to help it. So the idea that I had to get involved or even be invited to work for a platform under the banner and condition of a D&I-led opportunity is insulting, especially when you know the quality of your worth when it comes as a quality contributor, whether you're in filmmaking or whether you're in artificial intelligence or XR technology, roboticism, and things of that nature.
We have questions in the chat from Todd.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. Yeah, are there any issues tying the value of diversity in an organization to its ability to produce revenue? in kind of a dehumanizing way, or is that kind of a valid way and a productive way of giving agency in a way that is speaking the language of the executive people in a way that makes actual change?
Give us more on that, Todd.
So if you bring diverse points of view in to create products in order to sell products to them, is it commoditizing that diversity in a way where as soon as it no longer produces revenue for the organization, it can be easily cut out by the same justification that it got put in?
That's a great question, and the answer is no, because a process like that, for the very most part, don't exist. To even come to what you said of even eliminating the idea of what type of diverse vertical offering is effective or what's not, you would have to get to that level to even do that. And so companies or corporations are so remedial and they're so far behind, they haven't even gone into the level where they can be able to filter and qualify diverse suggestions and solutions and initiatives. They're simply trying to wrap their mind around what is diversity in the first place. Again, if you go to these different D&I head leads of all these companies or corporations, Apple or Google or even Facebook, to be frank, if you go and ask them, what's the definition of diversity? You're going to get 3 different definitions back. Then if you go to leadership and you ask leadership, for the very most part, what's diversity? Leadership will tell you that it's something more closer to affirmative action. Right? So we've done a really bad job. And it's just like what we do in technology. We as technologists and us that are in technology, one to another, we can talk about artificial intelligence and simulated sentient platforms, and we can talk about neural networks and elasticity and all different types of things in technology. But when we start talking to other people, they're like, I don't even know the ingredients to the pie that you're serving. I don't know what that means. And when I go ask people, and I'm an XR expert, right? And I ask them, if you go ask a layman, what's virtual reality? Many people say, isn't that a 90s video game? And so what happens is we become so in favor of our own understanding that if we don't begin to exercise some emotional intelligence, and one of the key factors of emotional intelligence is empathy, to understand who we're communicating with and develop more of a colloquial hive mind of one understanding, then we know that we can move on that type of foundation and I can build on that. But if you have a different understanding of what AI is or VR or diversity, and see that's, and I say it and I put it in that same clay, if you will, is because we look at culture and technology separately. Culture is technology. It's just like there are those that I've heard that take art and technology and they make those separate. And I'm like, wait, we got to go back to first principles here. Because you can have art without technology, but you can't have technology without art. So art and technology are not separate. They're one and the same. And so we have to find ourselves getting on a more even level of even understanding what these terms are, because a lot of people will go out there and say diversity is this and that, and they'll bastardize the language. And nobody will really completely understand on a more group ethical level, which we have morals, but ethics are agreed upon rules, on more of an ethical level, Jeff, on what this actually means, Philip. And what do these terminologies actually mean? Then when we do that, then we can have more of a candid dialogue and a discussion to find out where we've been, where we're at, and no doubt where we're headed. Then I believe that we can get to your question, Todd, of finding what vertical decisions and choices do we have available, what is working and what's not for this company. Because what may work when it comes to culture and Apple may not be the same thing for Google, right? And so every company has a different doctrine. So every company and platform should have a different approach. That's from your startup to your Fortune 500, Fortune 50.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. That covers it. That was an awesome answer.
Of course. Todd, do we have anything else in the pipeline?
Yeah. If anyone else has questions.
There's a good question in the chat.
I was looking at the question in the chat that asked about, you know, it says about the numbers, the 35% higher on ROI. There's a lot of statistics out there and numbers that will absolutely back and support any argument for diversity. I worked for a company selling audio visual equipment, and it's women who make most of the decisions on electronics purchases and even what movie you're going to go to on the weekend in households across America. There's a lot of stats out there that women have a lot of the buying power. We hold most of the buying power in households with families. There's plenty of statistics like the ones I see in the chat there. And for too long, those statistics have fallen on deaf ears. How do we get rid of those people who don't listen to these statistics and aren't bringing this revenue into? I mean, I really do feel like companies are losing revenue because they're ignoring their employees.
I think that's a great question, Laura. When you look at the statistics, in fact, 92% of retail power in the United States is female. 64% of the buying power in California alone is Latinx. You would think that that would do something, and African Americans or Black people have been driving culture for decades in this country, let's be frank. And so the problem is that they don't see the revenue until they see it. And I have to take something as remedial as Marvel, all the different type of homogenous cast type of platforms that you've seen when it comes to all the different movies, until one day someone said, let's make a film called Black Panther. Right? And that's not even my favorite Marvel film, but the principle of it remains strong. Let's make Black Panther. Let's give it the smallest budget we've given for pretty much any Marvel film, and it becomes your #1 film. What is that about?
Same old thinking up at the top. Became one. I never was a big fan of the Black Panther in the comic books. Like, I had other characters I liked and stuff, but the movie's now my favorite. Like, they did so amazing. And
look at Into the Spider-Verse, right? Yeah. Right. I'm using examples that I think we all could be more familiar with, right? And so that is the obstacle that we face. Is, to your point, Laura, I think it's fantastic. We have statistics as is the day is long. But until leadership has vulnerability, you could say whatever you want to say. You could demonstrate it however you want to demonstrate. But there's a homogenization obstacle that we have to overcome when it comes to implicit and explicit bias. I have bias. The men in this room, the women in this room, we have bias. And until we have a state of vulnerability, and before you can adapt vulnerability, you have to adopt an open mindset. I'm talking about here first. I'm not pointing the finger. I'm seeing it here first. How can I be vulnerable until I have an open mind to realize that I can do better? I haven't done as good as I can do. And I believe when we start to take on that type of disposition, that gets us closer to be able to figure out, how do we formulate a solution? What is going to work for the success of this platform? Because I will tell you this, and we said it in our breakout room, Starbucks didn't think it had a D&I problem with all the revenues and all the capital that they drive in daily, until they ended up having to pay for a $14 million cup of coffee. Because 3 Black men came in there and had a seat. This is a guilt-free discussion. 3 Black men came in there and had a seat, and they waited for the rest of their entourage or their group to arrive to sit down and have a conversation over a cup of joe. Someone called the police and said, there's 3 Black guys sitting here, and that turned into a $14 million cup of coffee. What's my point? Well, the point is that a lot of these companies and platforms are reactive. And they don't care until it financially affects them. But here's the rub. We're heading into, and we find ourselves in a different era where we're now virtual. And financially, we're in an economic downturn. How many mistakes do you think you can afford until you can't come back from that? We have seen great companies in this republic fall, and none of these platforms are too big to fail. And so it's now a thing of survivability. And the reason that we have to go back is because our technology wasn't built on firm foundation. And until we have women, until we have communities of color build these technologies together, we will never have a strong foundation in which we build on. I hope some of that made sense. I hope that you guys and ladies would take the time to come and visit and spend some time with me, follow me and add me on LinkedIn. I'd like to hear more of the discussions. If there's something that I can do with part of my network to be able to lend to yours, I'd like to be able to do that. Todd, you've done a fantastic job with you and your team of putting this together and giving us a place to be able to sojourn for this 1 hour out of this day during COVID. It's a remarkable platform, and I'm appreciative of the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Christopher. And thank you for everyone for joining us today. Next week, we're going to be skipping not a new normal. Instead, we're going to be doing an event called Digital Health During a Pandemic. It's scheduled to be between 6 and 8 p.m., but we might be moving it to noon. But anyways, we'll be in touch soon. But enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for all for coming out. And thank you, Christopher. Have a good day.
See ya.
Thanks.